Well, everyone, it's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland Reviewer, and welcome to the Wasteland, my weekly show where I take a deep dive into a particular film. And this is a very special episode as we're putting a timeout on my journey through John Carpenter because one of my former subjects, Martin Scorsese, has a new film coming out. And no, it's not Killers of the Flower Moon. It's a Showtime concert rock documentary, Personality Crisis, One Night Only. And luckily, I had at least one or two people at SiftPop who have seen it and would be interested to talk about it. And one of those people is Foster. Foster, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me again. It's just me
Now,
and Rowan, basically.
and yes, the other person was indeed Rowan. So it really came down to that, which it's funny because it's like there's another Martin Scorsese movie coming out this year, and it's just like, well, I didn't hear about it until like when I'm looking to get screeners. I'm like, this is a rock doc, and I look at it, I'm like Martin Scorsese. So I'm like, well, time to get a new episode ready to go. But for those who have not tuned in to Welcome to the Wasteland before, which this would be an interesting one to dive into first. We have three segments. We have coming attractions, and then we have our feature film, which is indeed Personality Crisis, and then some recommendations for you. Now, this episode's coming out May 12th, 2023, and this weekend is an interesting one, isn't it, Foster?
Hmm.
In terms of releases.
Sure is.
There's like five wide releases and eight other releases either on VOD, streaming, elsewhere, and not a whole lot of them are really grabbing attention. But book club has its market. Charlie Day has a movie he's directing, and then a bunch of random things. But both of us kind of fell into the same film that we're most anticipating. And what film is that, Foster?
BlackBerry, which is a crazy movie to say is my most anticipated, but it just looks like I don't know. I can't tell how straight they're playing it, but it's about like BlackBerry, like the phone kind of device.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it has Jay Baruchel and Glenn Howerton, and I don't know. I'm looking forward to it. What do you think?
I think I if you said to me there's a movie coming out about blackberries and you said this to me like 10 years ago, I'd be like, but I feel like ever since the social network, where it's just
Mhm.
like, hey, look, we made an incredible generation defining movie about Facebook. And it's just like, well, it can be done with
Yeah.
the right team. This doesn't have David Fincher directing it, but like it has an interesting idea, and I do think it'll be interesting to see if they do lean a little bit more into the absurdity and some of the funny potential with some of the actors in it, because it is Jay Baruchel who happens to have either a wig or very interestingly dyed like silver hair, and Glenn Howerton who has a bald cap on. But like I like both of them. I really like Glenn Howerton a lot.
Yeah.
Outside of him just being everybody's favorite sociopath from It's Always Sunny, Dennis. But it seems like it potentially could be an interesting idea. I have more faith because of the cast and also that it's from IFC. So
Yeah.
like
Oh, yeah.
if it weren't like an IFC film or an A24 film or Neon, I'd probably be like,
Yeah.
why? But like at least that gives me a little bit. Not that they don't have their bad movies, but at least it gives
Yeah.
me a little bit of hope.
And it's got some reviews already. It's got an 83 Metascore, which is really, really high for a movie like this.
Mhm.
Uh, I don't know. This just kind of came a little bit out of nowhere for me. Like I only think I heard about it like a month or two ago. But yeah, I really like Jay Baruchel. I think like out
Mhm.
of all the like, Jonah Hill, Seth Rogen, those type of people, he's one of my favorites of those. Uh, and also because of the How to Train Your Dragon movies now. So I think it'd be kind of cool if they play it a little more serious too, with
Mhm.
like kind of like a wink and a nod, but like the people in the movie take it seriously. That could be pretty fun and potentially interesting depending on the tone that they're going for.
I'm guessing like not quite as self-referential and meta as The Big Short, but I can imagine like everybody's a little bit quippy.
Yeah.
A little bit. Just leaning into that a little bit with who they have. But like I imagine it's like a serious film and like, I don't know the background of BlackBerry, but I didn't think that, a project starring Joseph Gordon-Levitt about Uber would get made, but it's like there's stuff like that. So we're
Mhm.
in that age of let's make movies about extremely recent companies, which I don't because like obviously I can't speak from experience of like growing up in the 70s and the 80s being like, oh wow, they're making a movie about that company like 5 years after they were relevant, and it's like that fresh. But we'll see. We'll have to see how BlackBerry turns out. It just this weekend seems like such a weird weekend, and I feel like they had to be like just movie studios in general. Like we got to take one weekend off in May because we have Guardians the week before, Fast 10, and then Little Mermaid. So there's giant tentpole films almost every week. Well, I'm selling book club short. They have a giant market of specifically women that are probably 50 years old or older. So there you go. They're going to be making the big bucks. But that is our one coming attraction, seeing as we both agreed on the same one. Time to talk about our feature film, Personality Crisis One Night Only, which this focuses on the founder and lead performer of the group New York Dolls, David Johansen, who is doing a set at Cafe Carlisle in January 2020. How
Mhm.
lucky they got uh, that they got this concert in before the fall of humanity. But you have this concert, which is in a small, intimate kind of like jazz club, and you have this lead singer of a very famous punk band doing like a jazz set, which is
Mhm.
interesting. But also, it's concert film and also biographical documentary. But Foster, what are some of your general thoughts on Personality Crisis?
Okay, so I watched this months ago.
Mhm.
So here's the story. It's not a big story, but um it premiered at the New York Film Festival, and I live in New York, and you can just get tickets to these like you would get to any other movie.
Yeah.
You just wait in the little queue, so it's not like I have some special pass or anything like that. But the reason I wanted to see this is because it was being introduced by Martin Scorsese, and so he got up there and gave one of his little rousing, cinema type speeches.
Yeah.
And that was worth the price of admission alone. I knew nothing about David Johansen. I don't think I had ever heard of the New York Dolls or I knew nothing. So it was kind of a strange experience because clearly some of the people in the theater were like all in on him already from the start. And so like people would like chuckle at things or like be getting into the music, and I'm like kind of on another planet over here, not don't know what's going on. Like I can't, it's hard to figure out his vibe a little bit.
Mhm.
I think it's a good music documentary, just not for me necessarily because again, I have no experience with him whatsoever. So that's kind of my ultimate takeaway. What did you think of it?
I watched this on Showtime, or
Hmm.
no, I got a screener of this beforehand. So I did watch, well, either way, I was going to watch this streaming on my TV. So I didn't get to watch this in a theater or anything. I actually knew the song Personality Crisis
Mm.
and the New York Dolls because, drum roll please, Aerosmith Guitar Hero. So that's how I knew about this particular band and this song. Um, I'm not really a punk rock kind of person. I
Hmm.
don't have that personality. I don't really have that taste in music. Generally, I lean more into like my favorite band's Rush, which is kind of like the opposite of punk rock music, where it's like punk rock's like it's all about the feeling and the energy. Doesn't matter if you're hitting the right notes and stuff like that. And then you have Rush, which is like one of the most precise, detailed, complex progressive rock bands of all time. So it's not really my kind of thing. And which was interesting that this big figure in punk rock music is doing like a jazz set.
Yeah.
And like I enjoy jazz music. I'm a big fan of blues music. And I enjoyed listening to the concert. Can I tell you any of the songs or like any of the feelings that I got from listening to any of the songs? No. It's one of those kind, well, except for that my wife kept making fun of the first song that he played because some of the lyrics were very odd
Hmm.
and kept making like linking words in a way that kept saying sounding like something butts. And I'm just like, nah, I can't get this out of my head. But like you can tell he has a lot of energy, he has a lot of passion that he's putting into his performance in this film. And like if I was at this club and like David Johansen just got up and did this set, I'm like, okay, I'm enjoying this. It's pretty cool. Would I go out of my way to pay money to watch this performance? Probably not. But you could tell that the people in the club were there for that. And then I think it's a like well told, well structured biographical documentary that's going along with it. And I think it's important that Scorsese, is trying to capture the influence of the New York Dolls and how big of a person in music David Johansen is, especially when it might not be somebody that is like similar to what you said, Foster really wasn't for you because this wasn't really like you had no idea who he was. I didn't know who he was either. I had to look up like that he was part of the New York Dolls. I'm like, well, I've heard of them and I've heard some of their music before, but I'm not like a fan. So it was very different from, who are some of the other people Scorsese's done these kind of films for? The band, the Rolling Stones, Bob Dylan. So like these are some universally well known bands, and then this one I think is might be a little bit more of like a passion type project, and also like a New York
Hmm.
kind of feel to it.
Yeah, I when I was like looking up stuff about David Johansen and the New York Dolls, seems like he's one of those guys that like everybody has a David Johansen sighting, at one point in their lives if they live in New York City. There's a couple people like that. Another, this is not a musician, but Richard Kind is apparently like that. Like people just kind of see him I think my mom saw him in Chipotle one time.
I
Which
love
just
Richard
like
Kind.
I know seems like kind of on brand. So like that, I mean, that makes sense that it would be a passion project for him. This is also like the vibe I got from this was like your favorite band's favorite band or your favorite singer's favorite singer, as in like he may not be world famous, but like the people you love and respect him. So kind of like stylistically completely different, but like the Sparks Brothers documentary that Edgar Wright did, where that
Yeah.
was like the pitch, your favorite band's favorite band. So I feel like I did get that, and you can sort of see like little elements of other groups like in the 70s, 80s, whatever, that he probably had a big influence on. Like if you go even just like go on his Wikipedia page, there's like you could rattle off like a lot of big names.
Yeah,
Um,
like apparently Aerosmith really loves them, seeing as they put them in their Guitar Hero game. So
yeah, and then I think also like if you're like part of the evolution of his music too is the idea that he starts with this kind of like pop punk, like um rock and roll type of band, and then gradually goes into the jazzier, bluesier thing as he gets older. But the core of it being that he is still just unapologetically himself through the years, no matter what. And I bet you, if you're a fan of him at all, this is probably like a very cool documentary to see and to see his evolution. And then you'll have that feeling of like, oh man, he hasn't changed. His music's changed, but he hasn't changed. So that's probably pretty cool. Um, Again, I didn't really experience that just because like it's not my kind of music. Another thing I'll say, kind of on the negative, but I mean it's really just a personal preference thing. I don't love the what that they play like the entire songs. It just felt like it went on after a certain point, and I was like, surely this is winding down right about now. And then he would start a new song, and I'd be like, okay, this is going to be 5 more minutes of another song. And keep in mind, I'm like in the theater too. I don't think I realized that it's like 2 hours and
that's
15 minutes,
yeah.
and I just kept going on. For me, not loving the style of music, not that it's bad, it's just not for me. It did go on like a while.
Yeah, it's interesting in the sense that like The Last Waltz is a concert film, and you get like little drippings of things that like backstory. Living in a Material World is a rock documentary.
Mhm.
It is 3.5 hours, but it's about George Harrison as a person, his music, but it's not like him performing. Shine a Light is a concert documentary. You have little drippings. This is trying to do both.
Yeah, exactly.
And like it isn't even like dripping in a little bit of backstory. Like it's legitimately big chunks of biopic along with songs. So like I was also a little surprised, like, oh my god, this is a 2 hour and 12 minute film. And like I've watched tons of concert films in my time because like I love music. I'm super into music, but like crowds aren't my vibe. And like going to concerts a lot and certain bands that I love, I don't think I want to like I'm going to see a Disturbed concert in August. And
Oh.
like I love Disturbed. Will I love the environment? I don't know. Hopefully at this point most Disturbed fans are getting to like 40
Hmm.
where maybe have the same kind of energy. I also have seats, which is nice. I do not want to be in an open space with a bunch of people because I've been to a metal concert before and a mosh pit started growing and growing and growing. I'm like, goodbye. But like I used to watch concert documentaries all the time or just like concert films because like I love listening to play and like Rush would put on 3 hour concerts towards the end of their career. And like I love Rush, but like going in watching an artist that I don't know much about and also it being jazz, which has that possibility of like, the joke from This Is Spinal Tap. It's like they go on a 20-minute jazz odyssey because you're just going with the music. This had that potential and sometimes it kind of did that. And when you're not super into the music, it's going to be challenging. Um, I did think it was interesting because my wife kept making comments that he looked like Mick Jagger and
Uh-huh.
Nick Cave's cousin.
Yeah.
Like if you combine them, because he kind of looks like Mick Jagger. And then
He does.
we watched a concert film about Nick Cave, and my wife hated it because she's like, all of his lyrics mean nothing. It's just a bunch of like poetic like lines being thrown together kind of thing. And you got that vibe a bit with
Yeah.
this. But and I also thought it was interesting because like I guess it like Scorsese at the point of his career, he could do literally whatever the hell he wants when he has money. And like projects like this don't take a ton of money. So like he could just do this himself. And I think it's kind of interesting that it's kind of continuing in that vein of like him really looking at New York because I don't know if you saw that Netflix documentary series Pretend It's a City
No.
about Fran Lebowitz. And she also seems to be one of those kinds of people that just pops up everywhere in New York
Yeah.
City. Because like I've seen her pop up in other documentaries. Like
Mhm.
I love the Booksellers documentary, and she kept popping up in that. But I think this definitely seemed like a passion project for Scorsese. And you know what? If he just keeps throwing out like a big film every how many years it's been, 4 years since we got The Irishman. COVID probably had a big part of that, but also him trying to find money to make a $200 million Western. Um, but if he has these little passion projects thrown in there, I think it's interesting. So I'm down for him.
I'm not as into it as you are, so I can't give like a rousing like go see this, but it's worth making. I think for me, I'm just wondering like who's the audience for this because I don't think it appeals to someone like me who's being introduced to them for the New York Dolls or to David Johansen for the first time. It felt more like a love letter, in that
Mhm.
sense. So I would say definitely if anybody's into David Johansen at all, then it's kind of a must watch in that case.
I can guarantee you that if you put out a music documentary or a concert film,
Hmm.
there's a big audience for it.
Yeah.
Because some of my most watched reviews on YouTube are about music documentaries and concert films.
Yeah. I mean, that
Like,
makes sense.
yeah, because the thing is, like, they had like my Linda Ronstadt documentary review blew up. My Dean Martin one 100% blew up. It's like my number 3 most watched review on YouTube.
Hmm.
And it's interesting because I look at my analytics and realize how many middle-aged people watch my channel. So because the thing is, like, because stuff like this, and I think it's interesting. But as somebody who loves music, and like, to be frank, I can watch any music documentary and think it's cool, unless, well, except if it's bad. Uh, but if it's done with some kind of passion and some quality, I'm like, I'll probably dig it on some level. And I enjoyed this film. Um, it's probably I was not a fan of Rolling Thunder Review, that Netflix documentary he did for Bob Dylan. But like, generally, this is probably right above that and below like Shine a Light, and especially below like The Last Waltz. And this is Living in a Material World. But any last thoughts, Foster?
I think that covers it. I'm good.
Then on the recommendations. So, Foster, what would you like to recommend to everybody?
Okay, finally I've started Succession. Um, it is pretty amazing. I don't know why nobody talks about this show, you know. I sort of unearthed it, you know, I discovered it myself. No, because of this last season that's happening, I did this with Game of Thrones too. Right as the last season aired, I was like, oh my gosh, everybody's talking about this. I have to just watch it now. And so that's what I'm doing with Succession. I just started it a couple days ago. I've only seen 4 episodes, but even that is like that's 4 hours worth of stuff. So like I
Yeah.
feel like I already know these characters so well, as little as I've watched of it. But the writing is so ridiculous. I just want to like scream like with excitement at some of the lines I hear. They're so good. I can't tell you how, like most TV shows, it takes you like, 5+ episodes to kind of get the vibe. I got it from episode 1. I was like, okay, I get it. I get exactly why people like these characters, not like them personally, but like as if they're
Enjoy watching
compelling.
these characters.
Yes, yes. And then it's created by Jesse Armstrong, right? And when I was looking up all the stuff he worked on, he did like some stuff with Armando Iannucci, like The Thick of It, which is one of my favorite shows ever. And I was like, oh my gosh,
Yes.
that makes so much sense. It's also way funnier than I was led to believe. I thought this was like straight drama.
No.
There's so much comedy here, and it's so good. So my favorite like dynamic I think so far is between um cousin Greg and Tom, who's played by Matthew McFadden, who is so good in this. Um
Yes.
I he might be my favorite right now, but I mean it's like neck and neck and neck and neck and neck with literally every character. They're so good.
Well, Tom and cousin Greg dynamic does not disappoint at all throughout the
Okay.
series. So it continues and it's going strong. So
It's Uh, he just these lines. I'm gonna butcher it, but it was so funny. He sees Greg come into the office and he's wearing these boat shoes. You know, he's like got this frumpy suit and these boat shoes on, and he's like, Greg, are we like standing on the poop deck of a majestic schooner, why are you wearing boat shoes or something like that? And it's just like the phrasing of these lines is so good. And then there's some that are just so clever. Like there was one where Jeremy Strong and Kieran Culkin are bickering back and forth, and they're saying, "Did you broach the topic with so and so?" No, did you broach the topic with so? No, okay, don't pin the brooch on me. But like the
yeah.
double meaning of the word brooch, I was like, oh my gosh, it's so good. And I'm thinking like these brilliant things are just flying by in like half a
Yeah.
second that probably like most people, and I'm sure I've missed like a million of them too. It's so good. And Jeremy Strong is ridiculous. I love him. He's so good. And I mean the all the like the stuff around him as an actor being like committing so hard, it works perfectly for this character who takes himself so seriously.
Yes.
but who's like actually a little bit of a man child, and is not quite as, um, competent as he would like to believe
Yeah.
himself to be, at least where I am in the show right now. Um, oh my gosh, I could just like go down the list of cast members too. And like Brian Cox is so good, and he's like, his he's it's just ridiculous. And even Alan Ruck is so good. Like his
Mhm.
intro when he talks about like like I'm gonna have the water. I don't know if you remember that line. I'm not gonna be able to. He's like talking to this young kid in the family or something like that, and I'm gonna share it with you, and the kid's like, "What
Yeah.
are you talking about?"
What the whole cast is amazing. And even down to like the goon squad, as I like to call them, or all the yes men that
Mhm.
just like surround themselves in this show. And that group keeps growing throughout the series. And they're getting a lot more of a spotlight in this last season. And it's just a bunch of great character actors that are doing, like Fisher Stevens at one point like starts becoming like a bigger role in this. And like, in what world is 2023 and Fisher Stevens is like getting a huge part in this like big culturally impactful series? And there's a lot of interesting supporting cast members that join the show throughout. So, which I'm not going to say anything about because I don't want to spoil that for you. But I do one thing that I'll add because obviously I don't want to say anything. I don't want to like accidentally spoil something.
Mhm.
Is just that I love how like Tom gets negged by like everybody else. So
Yes,
then he has to have
it's so good.
somebody, and
Yeah.
then him trying to neg Craig. It's so funny
Hmm.
because the shit that he says when, like, if he tried to say that to like, uh, um, Kieran Culkin's character, he get
Yeah.
tore to shreds.
Yeah.
Like the boat, like, are we on the deck of a schooner?
Yeah.
He would have been made fun of so bad if he tried to use that as a comeback to somebody, but not to cousin Greg.
Yeah.
Works on him. Oh man. And yet Tom's a very interesting character,
Hmm.
and he goes to some interesting places. So many great things for you to look forward to. And I'm not going to go any further. But my recommendations, I did. So I have a new film, one of my own films that I rewatched, and a watch list film. So, new film, Are You There, God? It's me, Margaret. My God, this is amazing. Like, I love this film. I got to go to an early screening of this like last weekend, and I had such an amazing time. And I feel like almost every single woman in the audience was crying at the end, including my
Hmm.
wife. And then we walked out, and the PR person that I work with a lot, she's bawling her eyes out. They just want to call their moms. And it's funny, it's charming, it's poignant. Um, I can't think of a movie that tackled faith in youths so impactfully and so honestly, because usually you don't really see that perspective of it. And it's not like parents trying to push it on her, it's her own processing. And I appreciated that. And you just go see it in spite of the fact that this is a banned book everywhere because, but just putting that out there. But yeah, Foster, have you seen it yet?
No, I want to. I've heard nothing but great things about it, so you're just piling on the praise wagon
It
here.
has like, well, also the Margaret is Cassie Lang from Ant-Man,
Oh.
like the
Hmm.
original daughter who's like, it's ugly, I love it. She's so adorable in that, and then she's great in this. All the kid actors are great too, and I love Rachel McAdams. And it kind of freaks me out that she's like a mom in a movie at this point. I'm just like, oh no.
Hmm.
I'm in my 30s and she's 40. But like she's great in it. And I think you could tell from the trailers Kathy Bates is amazing in this. And they don't really show him a lot, but Benny Safdie's the dad,
Hmm.
and he's a fun dad. It's really definitely worth checking out. I literally just rewatched this morning because I will be doing this for Rowan in the Wasteland. Is Crazy Stupid Love, which
Ah.
is my favorite rom com despite at least one of the storylines. Watching this now when I'm 30, it's really weird and uncomfortable, particularly with like the younger characters in the movie. But Steve Carell's amazing, Ryan Gosling's amazing, Emma Stone's amazing, and like Julianne Moore does a really good job when like she's in it. She's not in it as much, but like the cast is ridiculous. And just this is such a crazy film on how to collide a bunch of storylines like all together at once in one shocking scene. Have you seen Crazy Stupid Love?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's got a great like when it all comes together, it's a great sequence. Yeah.
So great. And then this one I watched for the first time because I'm going to be doing this for the Wasteland Rewind with Mike Hilty for Scribe Podcast is White Men Can't Jump.
Okay.
Figured this would be Mike like was like, you've never watched this before. We almost were gonna do he almost picked the new one so that we could do a Wasteland Collides on it, but he already picked Teen Wolf this year and we regretted doing that.
Mhm.
So yeah, that new one, that trailer, that looked like hard to watch, honestly. But Woody Harrelson is just great. Rosie Perez is great. Seeing Wesley Snipes just being fun for the most part through a whole entire like outside of Major League, I just basically see Blade. Think
Mhm.
of Wesley Snipes, and like he is so great in this, and it's a fun. It's a very charismatic movie, and it helps it get over the hump of like it's just a sports movie.
Mhm.
It plays out like a sports movie, but I enjoyed it. I had fun with it.
Yep. One I've not seen. I will also say I think from my memory, Wesley Snipes was also pretty fun and Dolomite is my name. I'm remembering that performance being like really memorable as a
Well,
standout to me.
I appreciate him pop look his like I love Dolomite.
Yeah.
That's my name. Like that was great. That's probably one of my favorite Netflix movies. Um Coming to America left a lot to be desired, to
Yep.
say the least. But like coming to America, to be clear.
Yep. Yeah.
And Wesley Snipes being like a warlord in that was like interesting. So like he's making a comeback. I think that comeback started with he got out of jail for tax stuff and went right into the Expendables. So we'll have to see if he's in Expendables 4, which is coming out this fall. I bet you didn't know that, Foster.
Can't wait. I've had my calendar marked for I don't know how many years now for the Expendables 4.
When the hell did the third one come out? That was like 2015. Yeah, I think it was 2015
How
probably.
old are they now? They're gonna be like
Stallone's 70
they're
something.
gonna be like racing in wheelchairs soon enough.
Well, apparently Stallone is trying to pass the franchise off to Jason Statham, who was the youngest one to
Mhm.
begin with.
Does he want it?
Guess the money's good.
Fair question, I guess.
Fair question. But yeah, so Wesley Snipes, great. That trailer for the new What White Men Can't Jump looks like crap. And
Mhm.
I'm not looking forward to watching that on Hulu. But you should watch the original one, which is also on Hulu. But Foster, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me as always, and I'll be back in like 2 weeks or something for vampires, I think, which I'm looking forward
Yes.
to.
Yes, I'm excited for that one. Um, I'm just hoping there's less CGI in it than Escape from LA. My God. There is so much bad CGI in Escape from LA. It kind of went in the complete opposite direction of like what made Escape from New York charming and fun. And it's just like, this is bad. But we only have a couple of John Carpenter films left. So, and Foster will be coming on pretty regularly over the next couple weeks because he'll also be on the first episode of my dive into John Ford too. So there we go. A lot of Foster and a lot of Rowan coming up, which I'm not going to complain about because I love talking movies with you guys. But Foster, would you like to shamelessly plug anything before we wrap up?
Just letterboxed FOSTH 101.
And thank all of you out there for always tuning in and supporting your Wasteland Reviewer.